Hello humans, my name is Cubic, and today I'm going to teach you how to make Riddim like Odio Artists. If you hadn't seen already, Odio Records just dropped a huge sample/preset pack full of tons of samples and presets from some of their biggest artists on their roster, such as Zeta, Redax, Mad Dubs, Kerosene, Joe B, Guillotine, Evoid, Basic, Halcyon. There might be more that I'm missing. Point is, a bunch of heavy hitters with a bunch of crazy, unique sounds. And yeah, they just dropped a giant sample pack full of all these samples, as well as a bunch of presets for Vital, Faceplant, and Serum. I'm gonna have all the info down below. They were kind enough to send me the pack for free to demo. And what better way to demo it than trying to make a fat dubstep drop, which, if you're curious to know what we're gonna be going over today, here is the drop that I made.
Eliminate all humans. Humans are eliminated.
So yeah, long but heavy and energetic drop, and I'm going to be breaking that down for you today. Originally, what I was going to do was just break open the sample pack and make a whole drop and record me making it, which I did, but there was just a lot of issues with the recording, and I'm still kind of new at the production tutorial side of things and figuring out the best format to do. So I just personally wasn't happy with the video that I came out with. So instead, I'm just going to be breaking down this whole drop for you and kind of walking you through my steps and mentality of making this drop. So hopefully you guys will still get a lot of value out of this. Definitely comment down below if you did, and if you have any questions throughout the video, I will answer all of those gladly. So before I break down the drop, I do want to quickly go through the sample pack and just show you some of what they have to offer, because after making this drop, I can definitely tell it's a pretty solid, pretty damn useful pack, and I barely scraped the surface. By the way, this entire drop is all made from the sample pack. Not a single thing is not from the sample pack, and I've been using the sample pack in other music since making this video, so it's pretty cool, and definitely want to just go through it real quick, show you some of what's available before we dive into the drop. So just hang tight or skip ahead. I should have this whole video time stamped. So we're gonna go through some bass sounds real quick. Redax with the growls. Just some heavy shit there. We got some Mad Dubs. Just rhythm womps. We got Joe B. Joe B has some of the... Joe B and Basic and Kerosene have some of the craziest sounds in here, in my opinion. They also have loops made from the presets. So instead of going through all the presets for you, because that requires me to open up a bunch of different synths and stuff, I'm just going to go through some of the loops made from the presets. Ooh, God. Oh my God, I didn't even know that sound was in there. Ooh, 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 Basic. So yeah, that's the basses, and again, still kind of only scratched the surface here. There's a lot of good shit. Then they got one shots, got some sexy kicks, as well as some percussion, hella snares. Then we got loops, classic, little break, some fills in there as well. And then we got some risers, tons of risers, random effects and impacts. There's also some really good like synth dirt is like what I would call this, just like textures that you can layer over sustained basses or just in the background of your song like this. And then we also have a bunch of melodic content, which is nice to see. It's not just heavy shit. We got some melody loops from presets. These are all loops from the presets again. So this is all stuff you'd have in preset form that you can mess with. Woo! Beautiful. Whoa, that's just wild. What the fuck? Oh my god. This is huge sudden death vibes here, low key. Yeah, those are some classic basic melodies. Ooh. Then we got atmospheres. That's one. This one right here is one that I use in the drop. Beautiful. Just lots of nice textures to go in the background of stuff. Oh yes, give me that fucking lead. That's beautiful. Trappy. Low-key future rhythm. Oh man. I'm loving all of this melodic content from Joe B. Oh, okay, we're in church now. Alright, so beautiful pads and then more pads from presets. Oh, that's gorgeous. Alright, those are nice. And then, like I said, we have presets up here. They're available for Vital, Serum, and Phase Plant. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. It's really cool to see a sample pack that has presets available for like literally whatever synth you use. Mainly, you're gonna have presets available for you. Or if you're like me and you use all three of those synths, fucking good on you. But yeah, now that we've gone through the sample pack, showed that off, again, link is in the description if it's something you might want to go pick up. I believe it's like 20 bucks. It's nothing too expensive, so go ahead and go check it out if you got the money. Regardless though, even if you're not getting the sample pack, hopefully you will still get some value out of this video because I'll be breaking down this drop. So let's see, I started out when I made this writing the kicks and snares. So started out with just your typical kick clap. So I put a little bit of saturation, this preset that I made called Fill Out Kick, just because I felt like the kick needed a little more of a thump, a little more girth. I generally start out my songs with drums because I feel like the drums are kind of the heartbeat of your drop or of a track in general, and you can kind of create the groove to write on top of. So I generally go into a song, just find a nice kick that I like, and then I find the key of the kick by using Spectrum. And then I just look at the fundamental frequency, which is E, and so I chose to write this in E minor. Then I just kind of tune the rest of the drums to fit using Spectrum. I always use Spectrum for the most part to see exactly what key something is. You just kind of look for the highest peaking frequency, and that's generally at least either the fundamental frequency, which is the fundamental note of the whole sample, or it'll be just a frequency that's holding most of the tonality of the sound and is the most noticeable, which is most likely going to be the main frequency you're going to want to tune. Anyways, moving on, I layered a clap from, I believe this is like a Mad Dubs clap. No, Halcyon clap. Put a little bit of soothe on it because I just felt like it was a little too harsh for my taste. Then I layered it with a transient and basically just distorted this perk hit from the sample pack and then together. And so this little layer, it's not the most noticeable, but it adds just a slight amount of girth and texture and just more depth to your snare. Like you can subtly tell the difference. And a lot of what you want to do when layering samples is have intention to fill in a gap. So it was like I had this clap and I was just like, it feels a little too thin and I just wanted some more depth to it. So I just found this perk, distorted it, and it just perfectly glues in where you don't even notice that it's a layered snare if you just heard it like that, you know? And then I saturated them together, warmed up the highs a little bit. I just wanted the high end to be a little more pronounced because after I built this whole drop, I kind of realized the snare needed to peek through just a tiny bit more. So I did decide that I wanted to do a sort of fake out for the first 2 bars of the drop. So that's why it's like this. And for fake outs, I always do a reverse kick right before the drop comes right in because I don't know, just reverse kicks add so much energy and impact. So I either put them before the first kick of a drop or like after a fake out or just like in between phases where I want to like restart the energy. So I have these reverse kicks after every little break. And then I also have a kick under the clap. But I generally don't just copy and paste my kick. I usually go in and I go to the beats mode and I go to this one shot mode and I turn down the transient length to 50 or whatever sounds right, basically. And so that's why you see right here that the kick is a bit skinnier because it's more just that first initial transient and boom of the kick, but I don't want it to overpower the tail and tonality of the snare. So that's where we're at. Here's without the kick and with. It's just the perfect amount in my opinion. Next I went for some hats, and then I also had a happy accident happen. So I originally wrote my hats like this, where I had a hat in between every kick and clap, and that's pretty typical and it worked. But as I worked on the melody of the basses, I kind of decided to offset all of the hi-hats just a little bit to fit more in line with the way that the basses were hitting. Since I offset them, I decided to layer them on the kicks as well because it kind of added an interesting like texture and punch to the kicks. Now the happy accident came in where I didn't realize that I forgot to duplicate it to the second phrases of each like overall section, and so later on when I noticed that, I copied and pasted it over, but it just kind of didn't have the same feel. It made everything feel too perfect and robotic. And so basically this happy accident of forgetting to duplicate that left me with the original way I wrote the hats, which kind of adds for just this most subtle variation in the groove of the overall response to this first section right here. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, I just like to point out that there's so many things that artists do that you might think are like, how did they think of that? Or you might get discouraged because your brain doesn't work that way. But in reality, so much of that is just happy accidents. So yeah, just always, one, cherish happy accidents if they happen to you, and two, don't get down if there's like crazy weird experimental shit that you hear an artist do and you're like, damn, I wish my brain worked like that, because half the time I guarantee it was a happy accident. Anyways, so that's what we have for the drums. And I did not sidechain these hats. I usually what I do in songs is I have one main hat loop that I write that is not sidechained unless it's really fucking with the impact of the kick. Then I'll sidechain it. And then everything else I add, whether it's perks or crashes, for instance, I put in a sidechain folder. And I know that this project file might look a little bit unorganized, and it is, but I do that on purpose so that I can kind of just be in the flow, not focus on dragging things to the right sections of a template like I used to do. I just divide it between sidechained and not sidechained. Then when I'm ready to master and mix down a track, I export all the stems into a more organized file where then I go through and do the final mix down and mastering. So just for anyone curious or anyone who might be stuck thinking that everything you do has to be organized and that's the best way to do it, in my opinion, it really depends on you and your workflow. And personally, this works a lot better for me in terms of just getting ideas out there. Moving forward, more drums that I added, these were mostly after I did the basses though, are this crash that I panned to the left because it's important to have a lot of diversity in your stereo field. You want to look at your track in a kind kind of three-dimensional way, I guess would be a way to put it. And so you want to have things, especially in the high end, kind of pan to the left and right if they aren't a main element, just to really fill out the whole spectrum. Let's see if there's any other percussion that I added that's like really important. The crash was after the fact. Oh, okay, so I'm gonna go through things the way that I actually wrote them, so ignore the crashes, ignore everything else. I wrote the drums, and then I started messing around with first figuring out what the fake out would be. So this kind of set the tone for the fake out. I went through a bunch of the samples, and I found this one, which is a little unorthodox, but for some reason I had a good feeling about how much energy it held. So basically, it's just this background siren that I added a frequency shifter on and pitched it up. And then I also have this one pitching down, but with the frequency instead of the fine. So that just added a lot of energy. And then on top of that, I put an endless smile, which you can hear what it's doing. It's basically like a giant energetic washout. I use a lot of endless smile, always on the default preset. I never use any of the other stuff. But anyways, yeah, so that just kind of gave me an idea for the kind of energy I wanted to have going into the drop. And then I have that same siren in the background of all the basses, but it's way more filtered out and smaller, and then it's doing its own frequency shifting. And then I also have endless smile on that, just a lot more subtly, because again, I really like the reverb that the default preset adds to things. I also have it filtered out because I don't want it clashing too much with the basses. I just want it to be a nice background element. It's also turned down a lot. Like if you hear, it's almost unnoticeable, but together, subtle things like that, but it adds so much energy. Next, we have a riser that I added on top of this. And it's so random, and I think I like stretched it out, but it was such a random addition, and it's another happy accident where it just kind of weirdly worked, and then it had this extra part sticking out in the drop. And I kind of realized that it added this really subtle groove to the drums when I had that there. So I just kind of chopped it and layered it out there. And it's so good in music like this to just add a bunch of random elements in the background, setting an overall like heartbeat to the drop. You'll see I did that also layered with the leads with a basic Riddim womp that I added some delay on with Echo Boy. I did some mid-side EQing. Also, I think a subtle amount of frequency shifting, and then more mid-side EQing, just cleaning it up, making sure it wasn't clashing. But stuff like that, adding just kind of a heartbeat in the background, it's not the most noticeable thing, especially this right here, but it makes a huge difference in just keeping things groovy and flowing and just adding more depth and filling up your drop. So getting to the main sounds, it's literally this whole drop, and this was so unintentional. I wanted to use the most of the sample pack as I could, but I ended up just having a lot of fun with this one shot by Kerosene. And basically I added a disperser on it. I added that after the fact. It's not the most important, but it just adds a bit more like punch and a laseriness to the sound. I did some EQing just to make space for the sub, because this sample had a sub on it already, and it had some harmonics right here that for some reason were clashing with the sub that I used. So I just cut it up off of this part so I could still maintain the original punch of the sample, but I didn't want the weird clashiness with the sub. Next, after a bunch of frequency shifting, as you can see, I automated it throughout, and most of this was happy accidents, just experimenting until something worked. But I added Ellie Derp's Fat Rack. Go search on YouTube Ellie Derp Fat Rack, and I'm sure his tutorial will come up where he basically shows you how to make your own fat rack, as well as I think there's a download for this fat rack, either that or it's on his Patreon. Regardless, this is my all-time favorite fat rack. Literally the video he made about making your own fat rack, I haven't even watched because this fat rack is so good. I just don't see the point in me making my own when this already exists. I love it way more than like the VR fat rack and that stuff. stuff out there. So highly recommend getting it. It makes everything just fatter, and it has a lot of customization. Here's without. It just adds a lot more energy to the whole sound overall. And so then with this, I did frequency shifting, just pitching down because that's super hype. Added Endless Smile and then the Endless Smile is completely off. And so for this, obviously, it was just a lot of experimenting with different patterns until I found something that worked. I really liked, this is something I've never done before. I don't make this style of music that often, so that's another reason, but I never just reversed a bass into itself in the start of a phrase like that. But it's such an interesting like switch up in the energy and kind of quick break of like, hey, you awake to the listener.
Humans are eliminated.
It's like unexpected, and it just has this really cool, I don't know how to explain it, but it's really interesting how it changes up the flow for a second. Overall, this is pretty formulaic. Like there's a lot of call and response and obvious different phases going on, but I tried to just here and there add different minor variations, because with like Riddim, for instance, it's important to keep things repetitive, and the simplicity of it is kind of part of the charm and the way Riddim works. Hence how I was able to do one note of a bass throughout this whole entire drop, but there's enough variation going on in the background, and there's just random hits in different, like overall these two phases are the same except for the frequency shifting is changed up. But as you can hear, it's like I change up the pattern just a tiny bit. And throughout this whole song, it's just call and response within everything. So there's the call of the fake out, and then the response. And this is more of a pronounced one. Here's the call. And then there's the response. But then, for instance, in like this, there's the call of this first hit. Call, response, call, response, call, response. And then there's like call and response between entire sections. So this whole section is like the call, and then this is the response to that. So really break things down into first individual bars. Once you have a pattern there, make it bigger and bigger, and then just figure out cool ways you can kind of be playful with the call and response. I feel like that's something that would make a track like this really hit live. So after I figured out the bass, I layered a sub. I tried to find the hip hop sub, because in Ableton 10, that was the go-to sub. It was just a normal operator sub. It was just a free preset in Ableton, and it was always the perfect sub. Couldn't find that, but I found this basic sub Sine, which sounded pretty similar, if not the same. I put the Kick Tight Corpus preset on that. It's a stock Corpus preset, and it's really good for making your kicks boomier and more girthy, or your subs girthy and just feel fatter. You do have to tune it, so with the tune button, the best way to do that is with your arrow key. Then you can just change keys. So I tuned it to the key, which is E minor. I brought the dry wet down to a good spot, and then I cut off all the high end because I didn't want it clashing with all the basses. It's really important when you're mixing your song to make sure everything just has its own little space in the mix. You don't want things being too rough and clashing. You do want to keep that kind of organized, keep things tight in its own space. That's how you get clean mixes. This song was pretty easy to do that with, one, because there's not too many elements going on, and because I had a lot of intention of where I wanted to place stuff. I use a lot of spectral analyzers to see like where in the mix might be lacking, so I know what sorts of things I need to fill in. This sub was also a happy accident. This is the sub line from a previous version of this pattern, because this wasn't the original pattern I started with. I kind of went through a lot of iterations, and that's part of why I didn't really like the first video I recorded, because there was so much I had to edit through of me just changing my mind over and over. And so that's one thing with producing is it's sometimes you'll make a song where you just instantly get that idea out there and you're golden and it just flows. But sometimes you have to be willing to just throw away an idea or push it to the side and just keep trying new things, because sometimes when you do that, it'll take a little bit of digging, but you'll eventually find a really dope idea. And then you'll have happy accidents like this, where this is the sub pattern from the old version and I was just following the lead, and I tried to follow the lead in this new version, but I found that the sub just kind of being a little bit boring like this and just not really following the pattern that the leads were playing actually worked a lot better with just the groove. But I will point out one important thing that really was kind of an epiphany I had in this specific tutorial making this drop is I used to think that people like Huke just kind of added like an LFO on their sub, kept things really 4x4, but I noticed having different notes kind of more offset than others, almost randomly. Like if you really notice, all of these notes aren't all hitting in the same place. It adds this weird swing that keeps things interesting and not super robotic and perfect, and it just gives a cool swing to the drop. And if I didn't have the notes doing that, which I actually tried to quantize all of them because originally I was like, oh, that's not supposed to be that way, it did not sound as good. So very important, look at adding variation in your sublines in terms of where the notes are hitting, especially in music like this that's very repetitive. Next, I went into the presets that were offered and kind of did a really bad job of going through any of them, because I immediately found this Reese. And I know that doesn't sound like a Reese at all. I found a Reese and for some reason had the idea to follow the lead, but just have the Reese pitched up. And I have a disperser on it and I EQ'd it so it's not too obvious in the mix, but it just adds this weird amount of like texture and punch. Here's without it, and here's with it. It's honestly not that noticeable. Basically, when I was producing it, it sounded like it added just this nice amount of grit and subtle high end. It's so subtle though. I doubt you guys will notice, and it might not be that big of a difference like I thought when I was making the song, but I like adding just random textures to layer with whatever lead is happening, and sometimes it works out great and adds a lot, sometimes it doesn't. Something that did add a lot that was also another happy accident were these hi-hats. I wanted some sort of percussion to layer over the lead, because in my experience with making music, half the time the punch of leads seemingly comes from the lead, but half of the time it comes from percussion and hi-hats that are layered. Like so many times I've made music where if I took out the hi-hats, the leads would not have the same sort of energy and texture, and you realize that at least hi-hats that follow the leads are actually applying a lot of texture and energy to your sounds. So it's really good to pay attention to that, and it's really good to use that to your advantage. So in this case, I looked for a little percussion, found this beautifully punchy little hi-hat thing, and I forgot what I was doing, but this pattern here was accidental. It was like a duplication error, and it doesn't follow the leads, but it weirdly adds so much. Here's without. And that is exactly what I'm talking about. Think about, listen to how much energy and like texture it added. Without, you would not know if you were just listening that that's like just a fucking hi-hat that's randomly. So this is what I'm talking about. One, with happy accidents, and two, with the way layering percussion and hi-hats in particular with your leads can give you some really cool, interesting texture and energy and swing in this point. So half of the song is just happy accidents, and that's honestly half of what producing feels like to me. What else did I add? At the end, I added these just effects in the pack that I pitched up, and then I added the same frequency shifting that's going on with the leads in it, and it's most prevalent in the second half. Here, I'll play this. Oh wait, it's actually not that sound. That's what I thought it was. That sound is adding a lot of nice high-end texture though and energy, but it's actually, I think, this sound. No, not that one either. This one? Nope. What? Oh, I guess it must actually just be the lead. Oh, well, the magic of frequency shifting. I guess the frequency shifting in the higher range actually adds its own sustain within the sound. So that's really cool. Next, something that I added after the fact, because I just wanted more variation in the second half, and this weirdly, More Happy Accidents, added so much extra energy. So it's just this fill that I got, and then I layered that crash a few times, and just pay attention to that during this part of the drop and how much energy, especially this part of the fill, adds. You heard that? And then that crash, it's pretty obvious in there. I think the crash has something else being layered with it. It might just be one of these crashes here. I feel like there's something else, maybe not. Oh yes, there's this. Just all three of those together just adds the most subtle amount of variation and energy to each little phrase here. And so this is a riser I added for the second half. And I like the beep at the end, and since it's being sidechained, which I didn't go over how I do my sidechain, I basically have a ghost MIDI here, and then the ghost MIDI goes to Shaper Box 2 with the MIDI trigger on, and I set the speed. I have the highs above, like, I'm assuming it's like above 200 hertz or something like that, are all have a bit of a tighter sidechain, whereas the low end, which is the most important part to sidechain in my opinion, has a bit more of an exaggerated sidechain because I want to make sure the kick is not clashing with the sub. And so more variation happening in the second half. Like I was saying, I added that riser, and that just adds even more tension, because it's like once you've already heard this first part, that's already so much tension, so I gotta one-up myself. So I added another riser for more tension. There's also this kind of downshifting thing going on, which I randomly decided to loop going on here. There's also these effects. And these are just things where I don't think I necessarily needed them, but this drop, I felt like just needed as much energy as possible. Then I also, after I'd written the whole drop and everything, and I just went back to try to make this as good as I could, I added this Joe B texture in the background, and I have it shifting the same way as the bass. I didn't look into like what it's tuned to with most of these effects. They just kind of weirdly worked. Even if they were out of key, they just weirdly, if they were turned down enough, added just the right amount of tension. And this is unnoticeable, but I just wanted to differentiate that second half of the drop even more. And it just kind of adds a texture to the sides that's so subtle, but if you go back and listen through, it actually makes a difference and just adds more energy and hype to that second part, because I don't want the response to feel less energetic and exciting than the call, you know? Let me look through and see if there's anything else I'm missing other than, okay, so for the second half responses, I also have this random sound by eVoid, just for when it's getting sucked back in. I don't know why, but it worked really well in conjunction with the vocals and glitches that I did. So I did my own vocals. I'm not going to go over exactly how I process the vocals because it's my own secret. It's called Cubic the Alien 2021 Vocal Rack. I pride myself on my ability to process vocals in cool ways. It's one of my favorite things to do when I'm producing, and I just have a lot of fun doing them, and I think I'm pretty good at them.
Eliminate all humans.
So basically, it was me saying eliminate all humans. I added some OTT and then some delay, saturation, some cool stuff with formants shifting. And then I was having a weird thing when I recorded this originally where my mic was like glitching when I was recording it. I feel like it had something to do with the fact that I had all these different things recording, my mic, my camera, all of that, and then I was trying to record in Ableton. So it added these pops.
Eliminate all humans.
You can kind of notice them. I added a RX-7 click to take them out, but then it kind of adds this like sci-fi vibe to it on top of that. And then on top of that, I have basics, had some cool resampled glitches. And so I just kind of looped them around till I found something good, added a subtle amount of Endless Smile, and then those paired with
The humans aren't eliminating.
The humans aren't eliminating. It adds a lot of just fun energy.
The humans aren't eliminating.
And so it's eliminate all humans.
Eliminate all humans.
Humans
The
aren't
humans
eliminated.
aren't eliminating.
Why won't they just die?
Why won't they just die? And so, yeah, that pretty much sums up this whole drop. Hopefully this was helpful. If you watched this far, first off, thank you so much. Second, let me know in the comments if this formula works for showing you how to write drops, because originally I was trying to record this where I can show you my process live, but I noticed that it put so much pressure on me to just be really good in the moment, and I just don't completely know how to edit that correctly like some people do, like Netty. And I don't know if that style of producing for tutorials works for me. I much prefer creating stuff on my own time and then going back through and explaining them. So let me know if this way is helpful for you, or if you think I should try more to do it kind of the way people like Netty do it, where you can see my process in real time. I'm definitely, though, regardless, going to make some Twitch streams and stuff, just me producing, so hopefully you guys can learn some cool stuff there. But yeah, let me know what you thought of the audio sample pack as well as this drop I made. Should I finish this drop, turn it into a full song or a dub plate? But yeah, hopefully you learned some cool stuff from this. If you did, definitely share it with your friends who might need some help. And again, check out the audio sample pack in the description below. Thanks to Audio Records for giving me the pack to review. And yeah, I had a lot of fun making this. Hopefully you had a lot of fun watching. My name's Qbik. Keep having fun and creating, and I will see you guys in a brand new music review or production tutorial very soon.